Olive oil, healthy or not? Well, this debate is rolling on, and there's a brand new study that is adding a new wrinkle to the conversation. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And olive oil. I mean, you wouldn't think that something that is so ordinary, found in millions of kitchens around the world, could be so controversial. But whether you drizzle it on your salad or you're using it to fry potatoes, opinions on olive oil run as hot as any political debate. One camp says it stands alone as the healthiest of all oils and even could be the key to a longer life. But another camp says all of those findings, those are skewed science. Don't be fooled. It's nothing more than a cleverly cloaked fat bomb. Well, a new study is in fact adding fuel to this fire. Very interesting one. And it's set out to counter a lot of those arguments, the ones that people are using to poke holes in the olive oil theory. And that, my friends, is the study that we're going to be looking at today. One that looked at people consuming olive oil who are eating a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. Some used a lot, some used a little, some used none at all. So what were the benefits? Did they still stand? Well, joining us with the results today is Dr. Neal Barnard on the Exam Room Live. And if there's a question that you have for Dr. Barnard, drop it in the comments or in the chat. We're going to get to as many as we can when we open up the doctor's mailbag today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's wade right into those debate waters and welcome Dr. Barnard back to the Exam Room Live. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Chuck.
And I am sorry to put you on the hot seat, my friend, because you know those comments are coming, man.
Yeah, bring it on.
All right, let's talk about this study. So correct me if I'm wrong. The researchers in this case set out to take away the findings that you could say, well, maybe they were a little bit skewed previously because people were eating that standard American high-fat, high-salt diet that may be affecting their health outcomes here. Is that what they were looking at?
Yeah, exactly. This is the University of Florida. Researchers, they brought in 40 people and they gave them a really, really good test. This is Monica Agarwal and her team at the University of Florida. They did a great job. To set the stage for this, you remember the study that we did that was published a couple of years ago where we brought in 62 people and randomly assigned them either to a low-fat vegan diet or a Mediterranean diet. And it was a crossover trial, so each person had both diets. And what we found is that the Mediterranean diet did not cause weight loss, but it also didn't really lower cholesterol very well. So that was of concern to a lot of people. But the Mediterranean diet isn't just a vegan diet with oil. It's a plant-based diet, sort of, with some fish, with some chicken. So what Dr. Agarwal's team did was really cool. They brought in people, 40 people, and they had a crossover trial as well, meaning everybody got both test diets. And one was a vegan diet, plant-based diet. And the other was the same plant-based diet plus a little bit of olive oil, 4 tablespoons to be exact. And the question was, which one lowers cholesterol more effectively? Will adding that extra olive oil help with the cholesterol lowering part, or will it get in the way? So that was the study.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I guess before we dive too much further into the results, there does at least seem to be a consensus in this olive oil debate that olive oil is definitely a healthier option than coconut oil, than palm oil, things like that. Can we at least agree on that much before we go too much further?
Yes, and for 2 reasons. Olive oil is better not only than the ones that you mentioned, the coconut oil, the palm oil, but also better than any animal fat you can mention, for sure. If you're cooking in lard, going to olive oil, good switch. Why? Well, because it doesn't have nearly as much saturated fat. Here are the numbers. Beef fat is about 50% saturated fat. What I mean is that all fats are mixtures of unsaturated fats. Those are the really liquidy parts. The saturated fat, that's the more waxy fats, and monounsaturated, which is sort of between the two. So olive oil has a lot of monounsaturates, and it's about 14% saturated. Beef, 50% saturated. Coconut oil, 83% saturated fat. So olive oil is going to win there. The other thing good for olive oil is that it has polyphenols in it. These are natural compounds that I believe have a number of benefits. And in our study that I mentioned earlier, although the Mediterranean diet was no good for weight loss and no good, or almost no good, for cholesterol lowering, we did see a blood pressure lowering effect. And I'm going to say the olive oil might get the credit for that. So that's the good part of olive oil.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm going to put a pin in the blood pressure question that I have for you, but let's talk about what these findings that Dr. Agarwal and her team at the University of Florida found with this particular study, this group of 40 people. What was the end result when people were eating a healthy diet from the word go?
Okay. Again, it's a vegan diet plus olive oil or just a vegan diet without the added olive oil. And what they found is that both diets did lower cholesterol levels. They would lower total cholesterol. They lowered LDL, which is bad cholesterol. However, if you put the olive oil in there, it slowed down the cholesterol lowering. The cholesterol lowering effect was not as solid as it was by leaving it out. So in other words, olive oil gets in the way. Now you might say, well, I could have predicted that because it's 14% saturated fat. Saturated fat causes cholesterol levels to rise, and 14% isn't as bad as beef fat, which is 50%, but it isn't as good as zero. So the moral of the story is that adding olive oil to your diet is going to interfere with the cholesterol lowering effect of a vegan diet. On the other hand, if your diet right now is a beefy, chicken-laden diet, getting that out and having olive oil in place of the animal stuff is a good switch.
And would I be correct in assuming that both camps, all 40 participants in the study, did both I believe it was like 4 tablespoons or more per day, or 1
Yes.
tablespoon or less per day, and they were kind of broken up, and maybe like there was 4 weeks for each group?
Yeah. And this crossover design, I think it's the best design you're ever going to have because you're not comparing an experimental group to a control group who are, they're different people, a little bit different demographic. You're comparing each person to that very same person. So it's a perfect control. The negative that you have of a crossover trial, though, is that people do one diet first, and then they're going to do the other diet second. And sometimes you'll see what we call a carryover effect. So let's say you have a person who is on the vegan diet plus oil first, and they stop, they take 4 weeks off, they begin the vegan diet without the oil. Well, the effects of that oil might linger on a little bit and contaminate the next phase of the study. So that's a disadvantage of this design. But you try to have a long enough washout period. You try to correct for these things. And in this case, the results were clear that if you add olive oil to a vegan diet, it's going to interfere with its cholesterol lowering effect. Now, I should say one thing, that the diet they did was a little different than the way we might do a vegan diet here in one of our PCRM research studies. It was vegan, but not really low in fat. They had, some avocado and guacamole in there and more nuts than we might have. Now, those are mostly good fats meaning not so much saturated fat. But if a person really wants to knock their cholesterol down or their weight down or their blood sugar down, they might want to ease up on all of those foods that are rich in plant fats too. So that's the way we do it. So at Florida, they had some of these other fats in there, but you add that bit of olive oil in there and the cholesterol lowering just it really just slowed that effect down.
And did both camps see the cholesterol numbers drop? It was just without it altogether, the cholesterol seemed to fade? Or, were these participants, these 40, were they already eating a healthy diet before they even began the study?
They were healthy people, but not necessarily following a healthy diet. They were at low risk for cardiovascular disease, but they were eating more or less a typical Florida diet, whatever that might mean. They went vegan. They took the meat, the dairy, the eggs out of their diet completely. So in both cases, cholesterol levels fell. That was good. But vegan plus olive oil, you see some cholesterol lowering. If you really want to get your cholesterol down, do it vegan. Forget the oil.
Now, let's go back to blood pressure. You said that in our studies, we saw blood pressure come down even among the group that was still consuming the olive oil. And you circled polyphenols as a possibility for why that was happening. That to me is surprising because if you're trying to maximize weight loss or you're trying to lose any amount of weight, the olive oil clearly has a lot of fat and calories. That's going to prohibit you in some respect from achieving your weight loss goals. And we know that typically people who have an elevated weight have an elevated blood pressure as well. So I'm just curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on the effect that polyphenols have on blood pressure for us.
Polyphenols have a whole bunch of positive effects. And I think the way to think about it is this. Mother Nature packed polyphenols into olives. And so let's say you sit down and you have 4 or 5 olives. You're going to get quite a lot of polyphenols from those olives. That's great. Now, if you set up a factory and you take 10,000 olives and you throw away all the fiber and all the pulp, you're concentrating the oil and you may be concentrating polyphenols too, to the extent they're fat soluble, into this cocktail, which they call olive oil. And it's something Mother Nature never intended to make, because Mother Nature packed that little trace of olive oil into an olive with fiber, with pulp, with complex carbohydrate, so that you could only eat a certain limited amount of them. So if you're getting your polyphenols from olive oil, you'll get the polyphenols, but you're also going to get a huge amount of calories and a substantial amount of saturated fat that you would not have gotten had you eaten the whole fruit.
Okay, and I think that that's, another key thing is that, okay, the polyphenols here, you can find them in other sources. So sources that don't contain this enormous amount of fat and calories that olive oil contains. And I think that that's something that people should keep in mind, whether we're talking about olive oil or even something like nuts, which also are a little bit higher in fat and calories and may also prohibit somebody from achieving their weight loss goals. You can find those nutrients often in other lower fat, lower calorie options, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's right. And you're mentioning nuts. It's kind of a similar story. And people will say nuts have good fats. I mean, the fat content of, say, peanut oil, it's very fatty. It's high in calories, but the quality of fat is better than chicken fat or beef fat or pork fat. By quality, I mean there's a lot less saturated fat. It's not so bad for your heart. However, it's still a lot of fat, and it's going to interfere with your efforts to lose weight if you're trying to do that. And as any squirrel will remind us, nuts in nature are up in trees. And you got to get up in the tree. And once you get there, the nut is encased in a shell, and it's not cooked. It's not salted. It doesn't have smokehouse flavor. It doesn't have any of that stuff. And so the amount of nuts that a person would include in their diet is going to be rather modest and also seasonal. So in nature, the nut intake is for human beings would be rather modest.
And to that end, Marcella at 12:15, I guess when you're talking about olive oil, you're talking about a really concentrated source of olives there. And Marcella is wondering, well, now, wait a minute. If I don't want the olive oil, can I just find some high polyphenol containing olives and get that same benefit?
Yes, that's what I would recommend. Yes. You could have some olives, and polyphenols are dispersed in nature as well. I mean, you want to have other fruits. You want to have other vegetables. Don't forget the legume group. You'll be getting polyphenols in a quite a vast array of foods. But yeah, if you want to have the olives, I think it's fine. Think of it like sugar cane. How much sugar cane can you eat? Not very much. You chew it up, you get some of that sugar. But you invent a factory that takes that sugar cane and extracts the sugar and throws away all the fiber. And now that fiber, that cane sugar, that sugar, cane sugar, can go into sodas, it can go into cakes and cookies in a way that Mother Nature never intended. With olive oil, it's exactly the same thing. Now, people are used to calling sugar a processed food and olive oil as virgin. The truth is, the olive oil is a processed food as well. They knocked out all the pieces of the whole fruit and extracted this thing, put it in a bottle, and sell it to you at a high price.
Yeah, and can you remind us what the difference is between extra virgin olive oil and just regular olive oil that we can find?
It's just a question of the extraction procedures. Very little is done to it. It's just pressed out, and you've got this this bottle of olive oil. And the extra virgin olive oil is the one that they're promoting more for health issues because it does seem to be the highest in polyphenols.
All right, so we've been talking a lot about olive oil, but Sharon now at 1212 is wondering, what about other vegetable oils? How does olive oil compare to that? And what do we know about their effects on cholesterol and cardiometabolic risk factors?
It's a rather similar story in many ways, which is to say that all oils and all fats are equally fattening. They have the same number of calories, 9 calories per gram, and that's true for animal fats and vegetable oils, all the same. But looking beyond weight and the effects on your cholesterol, day and night difference. Dairy fat, for example, butter, it's the saturated fat content extremely high. It could be as high as 70%. It's 70% fat, and maybe half of that is saturated fat in a typical cheese, for example. Beef fat, about 50% saturated. Chicken fat, about maybe 30% saturated. And the other 70% is the mixture of mono and mostly poly unsaturated. The point being that when you go to soybean oil, corn oil, peanut oil, the saturated fat content of them is quite low. And olive oil is sort of between the two. It's higher than, say, corn oil, the saturated fat content, but lower than, say, chicken fat. That said, you don't want any kind of fat to predominate in your diet in a big way because it's an unnecessary source of calories that's going to interfere with your efforts to really be healthy.
Kind of a nuanced question here from Syed. So if you don't know the answer, perfectly okay. We can do some research and bring that up on a future episode. Syed at 1217 is wondering about the quality of olives from various regions around the world. Would that be a factor at all, do you think, in this case?
It would be a factor. I mean, just take the obvious thing. You could just go into the Safeway and you see, here are green ones, here are black ones, here are others. And those colors relate often to anthocyanins and other ingredients in them that do have active biological effects. Have they been put to the test to see which ones are more effective, say for cholesterol lowering or that kind of thing? That I have not seen.
All right. Tina at 1205, we've been talking about heart factors here with cholesterol, but Tina is wondering, for those of us who are diabetic and have heart disease, adding oil to your diet is not a good idea because of insulin resistance. And I know that that's something that you talk about in a lot of your talks, especially with the Power Foods diet here too. In terms of fat and getting in there and clogging up those cells and causing insulin resistance, whether it's olive oil or any other kind of olive oil, the effect could be the same. Is that correct?
This blew people away, Chuck, I got to tell you. And let's go back. Back in the 1990s, Yale researchers started this off, not by feeding people oils by mouth, but they started an intravenous line. And they fed lipids into your bloodstream of healthy, skinny volunteers. And they showed that they would become insulin resistant really fast. I'm talking about within hours. They would get insulin resistant. And so then they repeated the studies and they used orally administered fats, palm oil. It's a fair amount of palm oil, but sort of the amount that a person might eat in the course of a day as part of one meal. And they became insulin resistant, again, just within hours. And then they tried a healthy fat. You know, palm oil is high in saturated fat. Canola oil, much lower. It's very much like olive oil. But it was almost as bad as the high saturated fat oil with regard to its ability to cause insulin resistance. So the way we view this now is if you eat a fatty food, and that can be meat, it can be cheese, it can be an egg, it can be fried foods, it can be oils. Some of that fat is going to be stored in body fat, but some of the fat that you eat goes through the bloodstream into your muscle cells, and it goes into your liver cells. And once it gets in there, it starts some mischief. It causes insulin resistance inside your muscle cells. Keep in mind, your muscles are there trying to take the sugar out of the blood and put it into the muscles and use it for energy. And if that cell is filled with fat, the muscle cells don't respond to insulin. One other thing, that when that fat from the foods that we've eaten gets into our cells, I don't know if you remember from high school biology, the mitochondria. These are the little organelles inside your muscle cells that are there to turn fuel into energy. Those mitochondria don't work anymore. And so people's metabolism slows down. So not only is the fat in the diet causing the cells to be insulin resistant, so you're headed towards diabetes, but also your metabolism slows down, so you're headed for obesity. And all this is because the fat from the foods we're eating, almost regardless of source, unhealthy fats, healthy fats, whatever, gets into the muscle cells, interferes with the mitochondria. They're no longer working. That's the bad news. The bad news is this happens, and it happens fast. The good news is it's reversible. Change your diet, get rid of the animal products, keep all oils low, including the so-called healthy oils, and your body starts letting that fat dissipate.
Well, Dr. Barnard, Vic is hearing everything that you're saying here, but still says at 12:10, if we can pull up his question, doesn't the body still need fat? Doesn't the brain need fat? So what would you say to somebody who's asking you that question?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is yes, you do. But you don't need olive oil, and you don't need saturated fat at all. Let me be clear. The body has zero requirement for saturated fat. So olive oil is 14% saturated fat. Your body did not need that at all. What your body does require, and researchers found this, more than a half century ago, that you do need what's called alpha-linolenic acid. This will not be on the test, but alpha-linolenic acid is a basic omega-3 fat that's found in plants. Now, there's not a lot, but it's in broccoli, it's in other green vegetables, it's in fruit, it's in beans, little traces of it. And then it goes into your body because you ate your broccoli, and that oil is then lengthened to EPA and DHA and the other omega-3s that you've heard of. And so that's the natural system. And then there's another essential fat called linoleic acid. And so the two, alpha-linolenic acid, the omega-3, and linoleic acid, those are the only two you need. You don't need butter fat. You don't need olive oil. You don't need any of these at all.
All right, a couple more technical questions, as I'll call them, before we get into more practical ones. Give some people some advice that they can really walk away from the show today with. Let's take a question, first of all, from Suraj, who wants to talk a little bit more about antioxidants at 12:20. What are the antioxidant properties of olive oil, and how do they benefit a vegan's overall health? You mentioned polyphenols. Is there anything else that you might want to add to that conversation?
Okay, great question. And I think we're sort of teetering on the edge of what science has figured out and what it hasn't figured out. But let me kind of give you the lay of the land. Antioxidants are in my book, two big groups. One is, say, vitamin C, ascorbic acid. It's in oranges and citrus fruits, and then there's also some in broccoli and other green leafy vegetables. And vitamin C is an antioxidant that patrols the watery parts of your body. It's in the bloodstream, and what antioxidants do is they look around for free radicals that are going to take a bite out of your arteries or a bite out of your skin, leading to wrinkles, or the free radicals do all kinds of mischief. The antioxidants knock them down. Now, the other category is there are antioxidants that are not patrolling the watery parts of your body, but they're patrolling the little fatty parts. So let's say vitamin E. I crack open a walnut, and in the walnut oil, there's some vitamin E, and that vitamin E parks in the cell membranes of your body, which they have a little fat layer in the middle. And so let's say they're parked there, they're waiting, and a free radical comes and approaches the cell, and when it gets there, the vitamin E can neutralize it there. So you need both. You need the water-soluble ones, you need the fat-soluble ones. And olive oil is fat, so it is a source of vitamin E, just like the other fats.
Dr. Christy Funk will be joining us at the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine. So Kevin, knowing that perhaps, asked a question at 12:05. Dr. Funk suggests that olive oil is actually good and can help beat breast cancer. What is your opinion on this, Dr. Barnard?
Well, I think like all oils, they do have a certain function, but the concern that I have is when we are taking them out of the olive. When you eat them as part of fruit, the amount that you get is the amount that nature had in mind for you.
Could you kind of make the same argument for maybe drinking wine and the benefits that some people claim that could have on breast cancer because of resveratrol, which then you could find from another source?
Great analogy. The grape has a lot of good stuff going for it, some of which you can see in the pigments in them, the anthocyanins and others that are in there. But when people figured out how to ferment it, then a toxic compound forms, which is ethanol, and the alcohol clearly increases cancer risk. So the grape had your interests at heart, and once it's fermented, maybe not so much.
And we'll be interviewing Dr. Funk at ICNM again this year. I love it whenever she comes to town, so we get the opportunity to talk. And then, of course, we've got the big Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign coming up. And, oh, by the way, mark the date on your calendars. Thursday, August 15th, the first day of the conference, we're going to be doing a special exam room live that day. So one day later than usual, but we will be joined by none other than Dr. Dean Ornish that day. So definitely save the date. Great opportunity for you to interact with Dr. Ornish and talk about his groundbreaking Alzheimer's research. I'm pumped up about that. He's also going to be speaking at the conference this year, so tickets still available, pcrm.org/ICNM, and you better believe there's a link down below in the episode notes. All right. Now, I said that we were going to be getting Dr. Barnard to some practical questions, and I think that this is one that a lot of people are wondering about. They have cooking sprays in the kitchen. Are they wondering if it's a cooking spray with olive oil and they're sticking to the serving size, which is literally, if you look on the can, the serving size is a fraction of a second. And if you just spray that olive oil for a fraction of a second, is that still going to be doing damage to your health? What's your take on cooking sprays?
Yeah. The idea is the amount you're using is so minuscule that it doesn't matter and it won't affect your health. The truth is that in application, people take that, and you need a certain amount of oil to do what the oil does. And so it ends up being a significant part of the diet. Now, I honestly think that cooking sprays are just effectively the same as pouring it into the pan.
Yeah. And isn't that like kind of just weird that serving size on the nutritional label is a fraction of a second, not a tablespoon, not a gram, a fraction of a second? Like, who's sitting there with the cooking spray and a stopwatch?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Chuck. Yeah.
To that end, Lorraine here says, I'm vegan, but have been wondering how to make sure the food doesn't stick to the pan. Maybe she has been using cooking sprays. What are some alternatives that you might suggest?
Oh, my goodness sakes. I saw a terrific video from Chad Sarno and his team where they showed one easy method that you take a nice stainless steel pan and you're going to saute onions, for example. And so you put the heat on high and you put your diced onions in there and you keep them moving a little bit, stir them up and so forth, but they start to stick. As soon as they start to stick a little bit, you pour just a little bit of liquid, not oil, but about the same amount as the oil you might otherwise use, but have it be vegetable broth or any other kind of liquid. Some people use wine or beer or water, but vegetable broth is good because it kind of adds a nice flavor. And you keep things moving, you keep stirring them, and it's sort of kind of like almost caramelizes the onions a little bit. Works great. Okay, so that's one thing you could do. There are a million ways of sauteing in liquids other than oils. Also, don't hesitate to get a nonstick pan. You've seen all the ads for made-in cookware. Those are very high quality, totally nonstick pans, and they work really well. You've got to treat them right because what you're going to discover that they don't last forever. You might replace them every year or two or something like that. By the way, if you have a nonstick pan, cover them with a towel before you stack them up because otherwise they're going to scratch. Don't let them thermoshock. By that I mean they're hot. Don't throw them into the sink and put cold water in. Let them cool down gradually. If you do those things and you treat them right and you don't scrape any metal utensils on them, they'll last for a good long time.
Thermoshock. That sounds like a band name, doesn't it? We are Thermoshock.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Well, that's what people do with things. You take that innocent pan and suddenly it's on high heat, and then you cook whatever it is and you throw it in under cold water, and think of what that's doing. You've got the metal surface, and then you've got the synthetic coating on the top, and if one's temperature changes before the other, the risk is that it'll start separating.
All right, let's switch from oil, go back to the whole olive. Carlene is wondering whether it's possible to even find olives that don't have a ton of salt in them.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, you'll see.
All right. Mark. Oh, poor Mark. Mark is still confused, Dr. Barnard, and I can't blame him. I mean, there's so much science out there that you have to immerse yourself to come up with these kinds of answers. Can we just ignore all of those studies that say people who eat nuts and seeds live longer than those who don't? So he's probably looking at this from an obesity and a weight standpoint, thinking that maybe these nuts have more fat than the typical person might want in their diet.
Okay, to be clear, nuts and seeds they do have health benefits. There's no question about it. The fat that they have is dramatically better quality than animal fat. So the person who makes a bologna sandwich and decides, wait a minute, maybe I should have a peanut butter sandwich instead, that's a good switch. They just got rid of all the cholesterol. There's no processed meat in their diet anymore. That's a great switch. However, the peanut butter is high in fat too. It's a better quality of fat, but it's not going to help you with your weight. It'll help you with your cholesterol compared to the meat products, but not as much as getting away from it. And with regard to your weight and insulin resistance, it's still an issue. So I don't mean to say that there aren't theoretical advantages to nuts. And also they have a little bit of vitamin E in them. A lot of people, including me, have said to folks, if you're looking for a source of vitamin E, maybe an ounce a day of nuts, like some almonds or something like that. Fine. What's an ounce? An ounce is put the almonds into your hand, palm of your hand. Once it hits the fingers, that's more than an ounce, but a little palm full of nuts will give you a good dose of vitamin E. Vitamin E reduces the risk of Alzheimer's. That's all true. However, if a person is really trying to lose weight or they're trying to reverse diabetes, that's where we want to be pretty strict about fat from every source, because I'm trying to get the fat out of my cells, the fat that's accumulated there. And that's where we're going to really keep the nuts at bay in that kind of situation.
Yeah, we had somebody in the chat who was saying, like, I just can't handle nuts. It's like if I eat one nut, I'm eating the whole jar. And that is a thing for a lot of people. They are not suffering on that one by themselves at all. So if you're going to have the 1 ounce a day, make sure that jar, that can is closed and put away before you put that palmful in your mouth. Otherwise, you're going back for seconds a lot of times.
And look what the companies are doing. I mean, they're taking nuts and they salted them. That makes them irresistible. And, they're salted, they're cooked, obviously, which they're not in nature. And nowadays, have you been to the 7-Eleven? They've got almonds that are colored like blueberries and wasabi flavor and all this kind of, they're trying to hit every single part of the taste rainbow with something that they can sell you. So yeah, they do become irresistible for many people. And there are lots of folks who are gaining weight because of nut and seed products that are marketed as snack foods rather than just an adornment to the diet.
Yeah, not just snack foods, healthy snack foods. All right, here's an interesting one. Going back to olives here. And this is one, in all honesty, I am not familiar with in the least. Maybe you are. If not, we'll do research and come back and revisit it. Mitch Soulful at 1227. I have read that olive leaves have all the benefits of olive oil and none of the negatives. Also, olive leaf extract. Do you have any thoughts on this? Are you familiar at all with the olive leaf?
New to me. We're going to have to research that one, Chuck.
Yeah, olive leaf. I mean, maybe in the chat, if you guys could talk a little bit about olive leaf extract, like coach us up. We'll do our own research. A couple more quick ones before we get out of here. Donna Owens, looking for olive oil alternatives, wondering about your thoughts on ghee, Dr. Barnard.
Well, ghee, over-marketed, really under-delivers. Ghee is purified butter, and it acts like butter. I mean, it's going to be bad for your cholesterol. It's going to be very bad for your weight. It's marketed particularly, obviously, in the Indian subcontinent, and marketed in this country for use in Indian foods. And many people get kind of hooked on it. But it has all the disadvantages of dairy products. Bad for your cholesterol, very bad for your weight. And for anybody, by the way, who has been changing their diet for ethical reasons, I don't need to tell you, ghee comes from a cow. The cows are artificially inseminated. Their calves are taken away. The males are typically killed for veal. The females are raised in isolation, and before they're artificially inseminated, it's a creepy industry. And if that wasn't bad enough, the animals are milked into each subsequent pregnancy. That means they're making estradiol, which gets into the milk, into the butter, into the ghee. So if you're consuming dairy products of any kind, including ghee, you're also consuming hormones that animal made. And you already have all the hormones that Mother Nature wanted you to have. If you had extra estrogens, that's likely to be something that will increase cancer risk, both for men and women.
All right. Anecdotally, we have Extropian, who's in the chat, going back to olive leaves, says, I actually pick my own olive leaves off of the tree. They have fewer olive flies in them, less of the fat, more of the polyphenols. And Google, good old Dr. Google, so do your own research, says that most of the polyphenol is, in fact, in the leaf anyway. So, all right, I want to circle back to that. That's another little nuanced question, but I'm always happy to learn about things. And final question, a lot of people have been wondering about flax seed, also has a lot of fat there. Let's just to appease the dozens who are asking about that today, your opinion on flax and what the limit should be there for a person in a day?
Yeah, well, you can only go so far with flaxseed, but if a person's adding a couple of teaspoons or even a tablespoon a day, the effect on your body weight is going to be negligible. People use it because it's a big source of omega-3, and it's that basic omega-3, the alpha-linolenic acid that your body will turn into others. I do have a tip. If that's what you are doing, if you're using it as an omega-3 source, pro tip is don't have other fats during the day along with it. In other words, the alpha-linolenic acid comes out of the flaxseed. Enzymes in your body have to take that alpha-linolenic acid and convert it to EPA and DHA. If you are eating other kinds of fats, corn oil, soybean oil, animal fat, whatever, those enzymes get tied up with those fats. They can't do the conversion on your alpha-linolenic acid, and your omega-3, your longer omega-3s don't get formed. So have your flaxseed if you want, but keep the other oils out. And that's good advice anyway. You don't want to have a lot of other oils anyway.
And let's kind of put a bow on this. Elizabeth says here, just a comment, when I quit olive oil, my cholesterol dropped 33 points and my A1C went from 5 down to 4.5, which is a big step in the right direction there. So final thoughts on olive oil. If we're looking at it kind of as a traffic light kind of ranking here, you have red, yellow, and green. Where would you put olive oil, Dr. Barnard?
If chicken fat is your go-to oil now, olive oil is a definite step forward. But if you've already kicked out the animal fats, then you want to get away from all of these oils as well. Have an olive, the olive oil you don't need.
You've been talking a lot about olive oil on the Power Foods Revolution Tour. I know that there's still some events coming up later on this year, including one in New York on October 5th. Does this come up in conversation?
It does, yeah, it sure does. We're going to be in New York on October 5th, Philadelphia the night before, and we've got a lot more dates coming up as well. I hope people will go to our website, check them out, and join us.
Yeah, including a big date over across the pond, joining our friends in England in September. You and Dr. Alan Desmond are going to be sitting down together.
It'll be so fun. Alan Desmond has come to ICNM. In fact, he's going to be here August 15th with us here in Washington, D.C., and he very kindly invited me to be speaking in Exeter, September 12th, I believe it is, and I'm really looking forward to that.
You know, it could be fun to do an exam room live over in England too, Dr. Barnard. I'm just going to plant that seed here today. I'm just going to plant that seed.
I love the idea.
All right. And pcrm.org/events is where you can go to find a full list of all of the Power Foods Revolution Tour stops coming to a town near you. And of course, the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine coming to Washington, D.C. once again, August 15th through the 17th. We said Dr. Dean Ornish was going to be there, but also Dr. Desmond, he's coming here. So he's going to be on the exam room live. Love him. My co-host on One Healthy World, Dr. Gemma Newman, is also coming in from England to join us. Dr. Christopher Gardner making the trek from the West Coast, along with Dr. Christy Funk and so many others. Dr. Barnard, I mean, is there anyone who you're just like really fired up to see this year?
Every single one of them. I got to say, we're going to start with a bang. Richard Horton, who's the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, is going to be welcoming people with really a mandate for putting nutrition front and center into the world of medicine. And last year we had the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine kick us off. And this year, Richard Horton from The Lancet is terrific. Representative Adam Schiff will be sharing his comments about his own vegan diet and how he got there. And then the first day, we're going to focus especially on brain health. We've got a lot of surprises of some things that help the brain, but some things that hurt the brain health as well. And then, as you mentioned, it's really a star-studded group all the way through. And our final speaker, by the way, Chuck, is Monica Agarwal, who did the very study that we've been talking about today, about olive oil. She is going to be there, and I'll let her take the fireworks from the olive oil aficionados. So it's going to be a great conference. And not only are the presentations great, the food is a really good example of what people will want to be making at home and what they'll want to share with their patients. So I hope people will join us.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the big cooking competition on night one with Chef Dustin Harder and the crew there as well. The Healthy Hospitals cook-off, or I forget what we're calling it, but all I know is that it's going to be an amazing time, kind of like our own version of Iron Chef up there. I'm just so pumped up. So pcrm.org/ICNM. That is your ticket to the 3 hottest and healthiest days of the entire nutritional calendar, my friends. pcrm.org/ICNM. There's also a link down below in the episode notes. And yeah, I can't wait to sit down with Dr. Agarwal at the conference as well and get some more of these questions answered. So if we did not get to yours today, have no fear, my roomy friend. We will do our best to get you that answer with Dr. Agarwal when she and I sit down together at the conference. And Dr. Barnard, also a reminder that today's episode, very special thank you to the Gregory J. Ryder Memorial Fund for their continuing support. They are powering today's episode of the Exam Room Live. And let me tell you about the Gregory J. Ryder Memorial Fund. They support organizations just like ours, like the Physicians Committee, that carry on the love that Greg had for animals. And they do that by promoting plant-based health and working to end animal abuse while also emphasizing programs that promote systemic change. I mean, you want to talk about an all-encompassing organization and what it is that they do to support organizations like ours. It is immeasurable, everything that they're doing. And so you can check out all of their great work at the website, GregoryRyderFund.org. That's Gregory Ryder, spelled R-E-I-T-E-R fund.org. And you see that banner down below in the screen right now. And there's also a link in the episode notes. Say it every week. These guys are just fantastic, Dr. Barnard.
They sure are. I have to say, Greg was a wonderful man and a great friend to the work that we're doing and the cause that we share. And Allison is carrying his spirit forward so beautifully and so generously. And we're grateful to you, Allison, for supporting the Exam Room.
Well said, my friend. And let me double down on that and also say you're a great man, Dr. Barnard. Thanks for being here today and helping to raise our health IQs.
Right back at you, Chuck. Thank you.
And to the crew behind the scenes, thank you for making the magic happen. And thank you, Exam Roomies, for being here today and asking such wonderful questions and hopefully clearing up a lot of the confusion that still surrounds olive oil. And for everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. We will talk to you again very soon. But until then, keep it plant-based. Now show the graphic. There it is.